So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Catherine Hershey with Sesco Lighting. I am a member of the Illuminating Engineering Society and also president of the IES Raleigh section. I would like to welcome you to our presentation on lighting well, lighting and the well building standard. We have a great presentation lined up for you today, but before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a box for Q&A. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. We'll address as many questions as time permits at the end of the presentation. Also, if you would like a CEU, AIA, or HSW certificate, please put your name, your email address, and your AIA number in the Q&A box. Lastly, our presentations are all recorded and archived on our IES Raleigh website, so you'll be able to view this presentation again or recommend it to others. And I'll place a link to the website in the chat section. That's iesraleigh.org. So today we're happy to welcome Brian Onedy. Brian is the Senior Training Consultant for Sesco Lighting. He has been in the lighting industry for over 45 years with experience ranging from management to product design to delivering community college education. For 8 years, he has been the Senior Training Consultant for Sesco Lighting, which is a manufacturer's representative organization with 26 offices and over 400 employees across the southeast quadrant of the United States. He also is responsible for CEU development and the delivery of 19 accredited lectures. Brian understands the importance of continuing education because of the incredible pace of technological developments in the lighting industry. He brings knowledge of today's lighting technology that will help you add a significant level of value to your specifications of lighting and lighting control systems. And then in today's presentation, Brian will review the well building standard endeavors to provide an evidence-based process to validate an approach to design for environmental health and well-being. This course explores methods to achieve health and well-being and the light concept of the 2019 Well Building Standard version 2.0 as it pertains to both electric and day lighting sources. The well light concept promotes exposure to light and aims to create lighting environments that are optimal for visual, mental, and biological health. Discover how the standard supports circadian stimulus, hormone levels, and sleep-wake cycles of occupants derived through scientific and medical knowledge to promote alertness, better performance, and better sleep quality, while potentially reducing obesity, diabetes, depression, breast cancer, sleep orders, and more. So without further delay, let me introduce you to Brian Onedy.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Catherine. I really do appreciate that. And for those joining us today, on behalf of Catherine and Gregory, we really do appreciate your interest in learning, and I thank you very much for the privilege of your time. At the moment, I'm going to turn my video off so that I am not a distraction, and I'll make myself available at the end of the CEU for everyone. So this is the housekeeping that I have to look after. This program is registered with the AIA CES for continuing professional education. Credit earned on completion of this program will be reported to CES records for AIA members. Certificates of completion will be provided for everyone in attendance today. This presentation is intended to be non-commercial and educational. So as Catherine said, please make sure that we have your name, your email address, and for those of you who are members of the AIA, yes, we'll need your membership numbers. This course may also be suitable for continuing education credits with other organizations that accept self-reported CEU or professional development hours. Please check with the organization from which you're seeking credit for their criteria. If you provide the name of that organization and your membership number, I'll do my very best to add that number to your certificate of completion, and that just may make your self-reporting a little bit easier. The WELL standard is aimed at providing an evidence-based process to validate an approach to design for environmental health and well-being. There are indeed a number of aspects to this, but this course focuses on the light concept of well. We spend somewhere around 90% of our lives indoors. Shouldn't we really be focusing on doing better for our visual, mental, and biological health inside the building envelope? That's what we'll be examining today. Our learning objectives for this CEU are designed to help you translate existing concepts of the WELL building standard into actionable practices to enhance a building's impact on occupant health and well-being. Help you apply lighting features into a project to leverage electric light and daylight evidence-based techniques for occupant comfort and productivity. I'm going to try to help you discover methods of validating preconditions and optimizations for the light concept to help you achieve WELL certification, and enable strategies for employing better lighting into environments for circadian and psychological health while reducing negative effects of insufficient spectrum, quantity, duration, and timing of electric light. Now, I know this sounds like a lot, but to be perfectly honest, this is one of the more interesting CEUs that I've been involved with for a long time, and I really do hope it's the same for you. So today we're going to consider the WELL Building Standard version 2.0. Like its sister program, LEED, which is an awareness campaign on how buildings affect the environment, the WELL Building Standard is designed to provide guidelines, tools, and a scorecard to bring awareness to strategies for the creation of indoor environments for a positive impact on the health and well-being of the occupants. The WELL Building Standard can be applied across a number of real estate sectors, and WELL version 2 is optimized for commercial and institutional office buildings, which takes into account the specific set of considerations that are unique to a particular building type. WELL is a performance-based system for measuring and certifying features of the built environment that impact human health and well-being through air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. You cannot just say you did something. You have to indicate and certify that you have in fact reached certain degrees of compliance. It marries best practices in design and construction with evidence-based medical and scientific research, harnessing the built environment as a vehicle to support human health and well-being. Each WELL feature is designed to address issues that impact the health, comfort, and knowledge of occupants through the design process, how the building operates, and the behavior of the occupants throughout the building life cycle. WELL is in many ways an extension of the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED Sustainable Building Certification Program. Projects can take advantage of the synergies which exist between WELL and LEED. Several of the WELL features match the intent of LEED credits. Because of their shared intentions, attainment of WELL features can help achieve certain LEED credits. Many design and real estate professionals consider the WELL standard as the big opportunity in high-performance building. WELL is the new benchmark for city planners, developers, building owners, managers, and of course, design professionals. So here we see an example of Arup's Boston office. Arup is an international design firm who designed this particular office to achieve the first WELL Gold in New England and the 14th WELL Gold in the world. It's a living lab, and it's a marketing tool. And just for your information, this project also attained LEED version 4 Platinum, which is not necessarily an easy thing to accomplish. The lighting designers strove to make the best use of daylight in all spaces. Their goal was to mimic the quality of daylight through changing color temperatures that we know today as tunable light. They wanted to extend daylight and give an awareness of the time of day. And they used indirect lighting to balance brightness and visual comfort. They achieved a power density of 0.67 watts per square foot in the open office, which allowed them to add the color feature in the break room, which you can see on the image on the left. And for Arup, this attainment of WELL is a market differentiator for them as they seek to become consultants to other architects and interior designers. WELL is a voluntary certification and is the first certification of its kind that focuses solely on the health and wellness of the building's occupants. WELL provides resources for creating healthy environments. It introduces a model for design and construction that codifies best practices. It presents a performance-based system for measuring, certifying, and monitoring features of the built environment that impact human health. And it uses a silver, gold, and platinum rating system to recognize levels of performance. Now, the tailwinds behind WELL are pretty strong, and they're growing every single day. Currently enrolling nearly 5.7 million square feet of space per day, working with organizations and professionals in virtually every industry to help scale up impact so that people first places are accessible to everyone, everywhere. On February 24th of 2024, the International WELL Building Institute, the IWBI, announced that it had eclipsed 5 billion square feet of spaces using WELL, a fourfold increase over the previous 18 months. Part of that increase was attributable to a 24-fold increase in WELL adoption in the Middle East and North Africa, with more than 500 million square feet of real estate now enrolled in WELL programs across 16 countries. These milestones signal continued rapid global adoption of WELL strategies, which now supports the health and well-being of an estimated 25 million people in more than 74,000 commercial and residential locations spanning over 130 countries. Corporations really do value the tenets of the program because, as you can see on the slide, 50% of US employers with 50 or more employees, or 3/4 of the workforce, offer wellness promotion initiatives. 49% of US-based companies say health and productivity programs are essential to their company strategy. 91% of employers report offering health and wellness programs for reasons beyond medical cost saving. And within the next 3 to 5 years, we can expect 99% of employers to offer health improvement and wellness programs. The WELL concepts are identified for their physiological and biological effect on the occupants, as we see here. There are multiple systems within the body that are naturally designed to improve. There's an air quality part of the standard, which is respiratory. There are motion and movement parts, which are cardiovascular. We know that light has impact on the endocrine system, which is the system of glands that secrete hormones that are critical. And of course, there are others. The standard identifies performance metrics, design strategies, and policies that can be implemented by building owners and operators and their appointed designers to impact these effects. So now let's review the structure of the WELL standard. Foremost are the strong principles on which WELL is founded. WELL is intended to be equitable, providing the greatest benefit to the greatest number of people. It's global and it's relevant everywhere in the world. It's evidence-based. It's technically very robust. It's customer-focused, and of course, it's resilient. WELL is structured to be applicable across all building types with several key elements, including one unified WELL standard. That standard focuses on 10 concepts, of which lighting is one. And there's also a dynamic scorecard to track progress in achievement. Also within the architecture of WELL are universal preconditions. Those are mandatory to qualify. There are flexible optimizations, and those, they're optional. After you've met the mandatory preconditions, flexible optimizations allow you to demonstrate achievement beyond the minimum requirements to earn points towards levels of certification. There are meaningful weightings for all of the concepts, trying to put emphasis on those that have the greatest impact. And they're designed for all spaces. There's a scoring system. There's even a category for core buildings, so that if you build a shell and attend to health matters prior to seeking tenants, you can also score points. The 10 concepts of WELL include performance requirements for better environments as a result of improvements in air, water, nourishment, of course, light. There's movement, which includes things like exercise and ergonomics at the workstation and others. There's thermal comfort. There's sound, which addresses acoustic comfort. Also materials. Regarding the elimination of toxins in materials, such as paint or drywall, we now know after experience we should do everything in our power to avoid specifying Chinese drywall. There's mind, focusing on mental, psychological, and emotional health. And there's community, to encourage people to have a responsibility beyond the building itself by educating the community about having a better lifestyle. All of which impact health and well-being in spaces where people spend 80 to 90, maybe a little bit more percentage of their waking moments. And most of that happens to be in commercial buildings. Each concept has multiple features. Some features are those mandatory preconditions, while most are those optional optimizations for earning points, which leads to success ratings of silver, gold, or platinum. Light, for example, has 8 features, of which 2 are mandatory and 6 are optional. Now, the points are accountable through the structure and within those 10 concepts, there are 23 mandatory preconditions, and there are 94 optimizations. It's a 110 maximum point-based system of 196 potentially verifiable feature outcomes, which recognizes that not all spaces in a building can provide points. And there's an additional 10 points for what's called innovation. And we'll get to the innovation in a little while. Each concept has a desired intent or outcome. So for example, the goal of the light concept is to provide proper exposure in environments for optimal visual, mental, and biological health. Now, all of these things on the slide, they do make a lot of sense. They're not beyond current science, and they're not unattainable. They're extremely well-intentioned. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the word innovations. It says for new and creative approaches not previously conceived. It's not official. There are no mandatory features for innovations. And as I said, we're going to get into that in a little while, just for you to remember that that opportunity is there. So as I mentioned, the concepts are weighted throughout or through the potential points available. Here we see the relative percentages of total possible points available for each concept. You can see that light, which is the focus of today's CEU, is shown at 7%. For light, the standard establishes guidelines to support the healthy aspects of buildings, to minimize disruption of the body's circadian system, to promote health and well-being, and to recognize the effect of light on occupants. Light impacts our lives on two pathways. Here's the visual pathway, which we generally know is allowing us to see better. But there's also the non-visual pathway, providing for improvements in alertness, performance, sleep quality, mood and cognitive functions, as well as reductions in obesity, diabetes, depression, breast cancer, circadian phase disruption, and sleep disorders. As I mentioned, the light concept has 8 features, 2 of which are those preconditions, the prerequisites for certification. And please note, it is mandatory to achieve all preconditions in all 10 concepts in order to receive WELL Silver certification. Now, the idea of the optimizations is that it allows you more points to achieve higher levels of certification, moving from silver to gold to platinum. The lighting certification features contain the critical information to guide, document, and verify design choices. How you achieve the intent is project specific and variable. The requirements are not meant to be rigid. The values in the requirements are considered minimum benchmarks, not maximum targets for achieving the intent. Each feature can have several parts, and each part may have elements specific to space types. So let's review each of the 8 light features that you see on this slide. The intent of feature 1 is to provide access to indoor light exposure and light education. Light is the main driver of the circadian system, which controls body processes such as digestion, the release of certain hormones, body temperature, and sleep. However, reduced exposure to light has been linked to the onset of depression and the impairment of cognitive functions in individuals. Appropriate levels of light indoors and design features to increase daylight are encouraged, as they do affect performance, depression, sleep quality, and mood. So feature 1 is that mandatory, one of the mandatory preconditions of light. And for feature 1, you can see there are 2 parts. Part 1 is for the appropriate light exposure from electric light and daylight, part of which is called spatial daylight autonomy, which is defined as having to provide at a minimum 20-foot candles 40% of the time over 30% of the regularly occupied or common areas. People do have a right to see and have access to daylight, as defined above. There are a lot of deeper requirements in WELL, which we are not going to get into today because I view this presentation as an overview. But to give you an idea, for example, there's a requirement in this feature that 30% of all workstations be within 20 feet of a window, which have at least 40% transparency They may be tinted for glare control, for example, bringing that transparency down. There is detail for daylight in common spaces, in regularly occupied spaces, and for electric light in regularly occupied spaces. Part 2 is to educate occupants on the importance of light for health. For example, newsletters or electronic versions regarding circadian rhythm to be issued to all occupants every quarter. Please remember, this is mandatory if you want to participate in the WELL standard. The intent of feature 2 is to provide visual comfort and enhance acuity for all users through electric light. Humans perceive the world through visual cues that are received through images formed on the retina of our eyes. The light levels in a space can enhance the user's ability to perform tasks in that space. The age of the individual is also a factor in the amount of light required for visual acuity. Feature 2 is also a mandatory precondition. And basically, what it tells you is that you're required to meet the IES standards so as to provide the minimum quantity and quality of light to perform specific visual tasks within each space for each of the 3 age categories within the current IES standards. That's under 25, 25 to 65, and over 65. And again, there are deeper requirements in the WELL standard that you can view online. Feature 3 is the first optional optimization, and it's concerned with circadian lighting design. At the core of circadian lighting is the phenomenon that we call the melanopic response. This comes from the research that's been going on into the non-visual effects of lighting. It relates to the way that blue frequencies in daylight restrict the production of melatonin in the body's system until after dusk, at which time melatonin washes through our system and it's time for us to go to bed. The lighting industry is interested in producing the most efficient blue light component in order to promote artificial lighting systems that can mimic the effect of daylight. Being indoors for extended periods of time often doesn't provide humans with opportunities for the required amount of exposure to daylight. And this impacts on the functioning of the circadian system and the quality of sleep. Disruption of circadian rhythm has been linked with obesity, diabetes, depression, and other metabolic disorders. As well, exposure to the wrong color of light at night has been associated with negative health effects such as breast cancer, circadian phase disruption, and sleep disorders. The measure for compliance is called the equivalent melanomic lux, measured on the vertical plane at eye level of the occupant, not horizontally on the task plane. So the green line in this slide represents the North American interpretation of the equivalent melanopic lux. And what it shows here are that the equivalent melanopic lux levels in a commercial building for different color temperatures. Cooler, more blue biased light provides a higher melanopic lux. You can earn 1 extra point for 15-foot candles and 3 extra points for 24-foot candles at eye level. So in a nutshell, what this means is that it's important to supply higher blue pumped light into the retina during the workday to the cells that make use of light for melatonin secretion. These artificial lighting systems are intended to provide an alert working environment for as long as we're at the office. However, for shift workers, that can be a little bit more complicated. The exploitation of Mellanopic Lux is a very serious tool in the design of comprehensive lighting schemes for health and wellness. So this slide hopefully helps you understand this just a little bit better. So please look at the chart. It starts at 6 a.m. and the darker sections represent night. We show here the 4 primary attributes that circadian stimulus is concerned with. First is the secretion of melatonin, and that's the red line. You can see that melatonin is suppressed with daylight and daytime interaction and starts to increase when darkness comes on. It peaks around the time you start to go into your wake cycle. Melatonin is the hormone that establishes the human biological clock. It's not a sleep or wake hormone. Next is cortisol. That's the blue line. Cortisol is also affected by light, and it has the opposite cycle to melatonin and affects our acute health system and can have an effect on obesity, diabetes, depression, and even breast cancer. One of the other lines, alertness, that's the yellow line, increases as you wake in the morning and peaks at around 1 or 2 in the afternoon when your energy levels are climbing. Your cognitive functions also peak around 1 or 2, which really is your best time for thought and work. Then your alertness decreases throughout the night. Your body temperature, the dashed red line, increases all through the day and actually is the highest as you're going to go to sleep. And then it plummets as you go into a deep sleep. All of these have a proven effect on concentration, relaxation, and alertness. What outcome you get is dependent on the light that you get. And 4 attributes of the effectiveness of light are shown here. First, we see the spectrum of the light. Is it red, yellow rich or blue rich? Science has shown that warm light and cool light do have an impact on the outcome. And that's what the equivalent Mellanopic Lux is based on and comes from. Next, we have the quantity of light. So that means how much light is provided. Next, the duration or exposure of the light. And lastly, the timing of the light, all of which impact the effectiveness of light on cortisol and melatonin production, alertness, and the temperatures of our body. But here, for example, is the same information just shown a little bit differently. The degree of effect is dependent on the dose of light, which includes spectrum, brightness, duration, and timing. General understanding of dose is shown in the 3 rows. The upper row shows color composition from cool to warm. The middle row shows timing in the 24-hour cycle, and the lower row describes what is currently understood for daily health for night, dawn, day, and dusk. So night, red biased light helps you get a good night's sleep. Dawn, increasing the blue bias, raises the energy level. And we have day. Over time, blue shifts to warm, red bias tones. And then we have dusk, where lower light levels in the red bias tones start the production of melatonin. Tunable lighting systems can deliver key benefits in many lighting applications. Tunable light applications use sophisticated LED drivers and fixtures to independently control both the color temperature and the intensity. Tunable white LED luminaires are designed to allow you to adjust the color temperature from roughly 2500 Kelvin, which is a very warm red-yellow color temperature, to 6000 Kelvin and plus, which is that blue-biased color temperature. Tunable lighting systems can impact all space types and applications. Different areas do indeed have different requirements. Some areas require intense exposure, such as offices and industrial, But retail, that would be an area usually requiring less intense exposure. So on this slide, we list a few areas that some of you may have an interest in. Healthcare, retail, office, education, industrial, and hospitality. So for example, key benefits of tunable lighting in an office can be increased motivation and more concentration and energy by increasing blue biased light to stimulate cortisol during the workday. These are pretty common sense goals. If through lighting, employees are more motivated and more productive, that's a pretty big benefit. Same goes for education, where blue biased illumination can be introduced to aid with focus and concentration. Red-yellow light could be used to help calm primary students, for example, during periods assigned for rest. And if lighting can improve school performance, for most people, that would be a really good thing. Glare has been associated with a host of health issues that range from visual discomfort and eye fatigue to headaches and migraines. Further, glare can lead to visual impairment and discomfort, which can indeed cause accidents in the workplace. The term glare is pretty suggestive for most people. Some are going to talk about reflections. Some people will talk about lights flashing in their eyes. Those are really just aspects of glare. In its truest sense, glare can be defined as unwanted light. And feature 4 centers on glare control for both daylight and electric light. We want to minimize visual discomfort caused by glare. Part 1 concerns itself with solar shading, largely to avoid sun intrusion that strikes work surfaces and is too bright and can be debilitating. And that can indeed affect performance. Shades that are somewhat translucent give the benefit of daylight, but you don't get direct sun intrusion. And by the way, just as a note, east and west exposures might have tremendous impact on glare, while north and south, really not so much. And part 2 requires limits to electric light glare defined by the metric UGR. That's the acronym for Unified Glare Rating. It suggests that a UGR of less than 19 is preferred for most commercial spaces with ceilings under 16 feet and a UGR of under 22 for ceilings over 16 feet. If you're familiar with the term visual comfort probability, VCP, that was an earlier system which indicated the percentage of people who would find a space visually comfortable. The higher the percentage, the better the level of comfort. The unified glare reading, UGR, is similar and it's used today to determine established limits from direct glare from fixtures. The UGR rating helps determine whether a fixture is likely to cause discomfort to those around it. And here's a partial table that suggests how they can be used. The UGR scale goes from 5, which is very low, to 50, which is ridiculously glary. UGR is calculated after taking into account a number of factors that may affect the amount of glare a fixture causes. These include the lumen output and the angle of the luminaire. A lower UGR rating means less glare. So if you look at the middle column titled discomfort glare, and the first box noted is imperceptible, you can see that the UGR is 10 and the VCP is 90. So going back to what we said before, VCP was a percentage of people who would find a space comfortable. So having that 10 or that 90 is really good. And the UGR of 10 shows you that it's imperceptible. Again, a really good metric. Both VCP and UGR are acceptable metrics, but today UGR is more prevalent. Whether the specification sheet of the fixture provides glare data in either metric, what this really means is that there are established methods of what the glare rating is within certain space conditions, and those really do need to be sought out and verified to gain credit for this feature. The fifth feature is enhanced daylight access, and it's about supporting circadian and psychological health through the indoor daylight exposure and having outdoor views. Exposure to daylight has been proven to have a substantial impact on mood, circadian health, and productivity. Studies also show strong links between quality of views in office environments and the performance of employees. Providing users with daylight in a space provides visual, emotional, and physiological benefits. Feature 5 focuses on providing beneficial daylight exposure with the connection to nature and the outdoor world provided by views. Part 1 is a daylight plan that states that 70% of workstations need to be within 25 feet of windows, or the window area equals 10% of the floor area. You study the top picture, and assuming that the left side of the image is similar to what you see on the right side here, you see a space that has a tremendous amount of daylight, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, plus a clear story above. Chances are that the window area is equal to or better than 10% of the floor area. As well, what you can see here is that probably everyone is within 25 feet of a window as another way to meet this part of the requirement. So we know it can be done. Part 2 is an enhanced version of the first mandatory precondition, which demands 20-foot candles 40% of the time over 30% of the area. That was the first part. The fifth feature asks for intelligently increasing the amount of daylight you're putting into a space to 30-foot candles for 50% of the time over 50% of the area. The more daylight you can design into the space, the more points you can earn. It also asks for the annual sunlight exposure, the ASE, to be limited to 1,000 lux. That's basically 100-foot candles for no more than 250 hours for no more than 10% of the occupied space. And frankly, 100-foot candles is a lot of daylight. And you still do have to do this while providing daylight autonomy. Again, what we're talking about is really intelligent lighting design. Part 3 is to ensure views for at least 50% of the occupants. So what does constitute a view? It's commonly understood as no partitions or low partitions such that a seated person can see directly out of a window. Even interior rooms must meet this requirement, and that can be achieved by using glazing perpendicular to the windows of the building skin, so that even if you're in a meeting, you have exposure to a view through the glazing. And there are also lots of ways to achieve this. What is the importance of access to daylight? There is evidence that daylight is good for business in improving focus and health, with psychologists and psychiatrists citing the lack of natural light as the #1 workplace health hazard. Sudden increases and decreases in brightness can cause a high level of visual discomfort, visual balance. Feature 6 has as its intention to create lighting environments that enhance visual comfort. So if you look at the picture on the bottom right, it's a corridor that happens to be illuminated by a wall fixture. It's not going down the center of the corridor. There are no specific tasks being performed. The space is half black and half white on the ceiling, and the wall is a place where they've hung art. Now, this is just another way to light a space and do it with a degree of sensitivity. And that is what feature 6 is all about. It concerns itself with managing brightness, which is also referred to as luminance ratios. In simple terms, we call it brightness ratios, and brightness is managed largely through reflectivity. This table from the IES Recommended Practice 1-12, or P1-12 for Office Recommended Practices, captures the primary requirements of feature 6. What this table means is that we need to get control of brightness within a space. When brightness is properly managed, the occupants maintain better task attention. Being in the space is visually comfortable, and veiling reflections, which we also know as reflected glare, they're minimized. Now, a great example of a veiling reflection is when you sit in front of your computer screen and you have to fidget and move around until you find that spot where the screen isn't struck by that unwanted light that makes it tough to see. The less of that, the better it is. When you're doing any significant visual task, the more even the contrast, the better things are. When contrast is high, the less visually comfortable you are. Well, feature 7 requires projects to take into account characteristics of electric light used in a space. These characteristics are color rendering, color quality, and flicker. Humans are tuned to the color rendering provided by daylight and recognize colors in association with daylight. Color can impact people's cognitive behavior. The idea is to have a richer, more vibrant environment. The higher the color rendering index, the better color that you're seeing. Flicker also has to be managed and has been associated with fluorescent fixtures and lamps with eye strain, headaches, migraines, and yes, unfortunately, epileptic seizures. Today, with LEDs, quality electric drivers are utilized by quality manufacturers to mitigate flicker. The intent of the last of the optimization features requires projects to implement strategies for mechanical controls, such as shading, and electronic controls, such as dimming, that take into account personalization of the user's interaction with physical space. Lighting environments that are customizable by individuals have been shown to improve satisfaction, productivity, mood, and well-being. Part 1 of Feature 8 requires not just code-compliant lighting control, but also allows for the personalization in the form of tunable white variability, as well as manual override of scheduled control profiles. As someone older, I know that there are times I require more or a different type of light. My younger colleagues may need less or what is different for them. We should be able to customize our environments. And Part 2 requires that provisions be made for supplemental task lighting when requested by occupants to provide around twice the general lighting level. So if I need more light, it should be provided, or at the very least, I should be able to bring in my favorite desk lamp and use it where I'm working. Tunable lighting systems can do much more than just provide variable light. It can create meaningful experiences over time. It can adapt to the needs of users based on age and activity. It can adapt to the use of the space. It provides the possibility to manipulate the color of white light and modify the intensity over time. and it can provide mood and motivation. It also can support people to perform better, and it can significantly improve patient outcome or patient comfort and healing outcomes. Tunable lighting systems, they're pretty amazing. So we mentioned the word innovation before, and there is that innovation concept feature which behaves almost like a wild card in the WELL standard. It's designed to recognize strategies and practices that positively impact project occupants, which go above and beyond the current requirements. It relates to health and wellness in a novel way and has to be substantiated by existing scientific, medical, and/or industrial research. Often, this means new scientific developments or regulations that were not available previously when you started your WELL journey. This slide summarizes some of the strategies required so that you can answer the question, how do you light well? You follow the IES best practices for luminance balance, light levels, glare, and contrast ratios. You manage your daylight by optimizing views, optimizing exposure, and optimizing control. You attend to quality in both color and flicker, and you do consider future-proofing with tunable white lighting. When considering the value of adopting the WELL building standard, a life cycle assessment should be considered in relation to historical corporate costs, as we see in this pie chart. Since salary and benefit expenditures far outweigh other costs, the impact of a 1% increase in productivity can carry a significant increase to the profitability of the corporation. The return on investment in lighting is far more than just energy savings. It can impact productivity through healthier and wellness-oriented spaces. We can have a much greater return on the investment by and through the productivity of people. So invest in WELL. Invest in better light. The value of WELL building as a new market driver can be calculated as a comparison to other expenditures, such as those for meeting energy and sustainability goals and the resulting return on investment in non-residential construction projects. WELL building can piggyback on those investments. And it's important to note that the corporate WELL building investment directly and positively impacts human resource results and spending. So this CEU has been focused on the light concept. All 10 concepts include preconditions and optimization features that are evidence-based to design environments that fuel our bodies, keep us moving, inspire our best work, and facilitate a good night's sleep. The WELL certification process involves 5 steps. There's registration, there's documentation, performance verification, certification, and there's recertification, which has to be completed after 3 years, ensuring that the project maintains the same high level of design, maintenance, and operations over time. In order to get to WELL, the WELL tool will help you estimate how good a candidate to the project is for certification, the costs involved in administration, and the ways to prioritize goals for your project. Many of the facts contained within this presentation are directly presented and cited in the WELL Building Standard version 2. There's a lot of information available online. You can find instructions on how to start, how to certify, the requirements and tools, as well as a host of other data at wellcertified.com. The WELL Building Standard provides a model for design and construction to integrate human health features in the built environment. In other words, the effect of the building on the occupants. And the beauty of it is performance-based to measure that impact. So this brings us to the end of our presentation on lighting WELL and the WELL Building Standard. I can't thank you enough for your time and your interest today. It's a big subject, and this overview was really designed to pique your interest and hopefully give you some ideas on just how great an impact lighting has on spaces in regard to human health. And on behalf of Catherine, Greg, and myself, we hope you have a wonderful day.